I found the draft of my father's will sitting openly on his mahogany desk, my name crossed out in thick, angry red marker and replaced with the name of my stepsister. Next to it was a blueprint for a home renovation labeled Kylie's Master Suite, which showed my current bedroom being demolished to make space for her new walk-in closet. My father, Robert, didn't even try to hide it. He wanted me to see it. My name is Maya Brooks. To the neighbors in our exclusive gated community, I am the quiet, submissive daughter who drives a 10-year-old sedan and wears thrift store clothes while my family vacations in Aspen. But what my father and his new wife don't know is that I am not just a high school student. I am an incoming aerospace engineering major at Purdue, and as of 12:01 a.m. this morning, I am the sole legal owner of everything they think is theirs. It was Tuesday, my 18th birthday. In a normal family, there would be balloons or at least a card. In the Brooks household, today was the kickoff of Kylie's Week, a 7-day celebration leading up to my stepsister's 19th birthday, which wasn't even until Friday. The kitchen island was overflowing with catering trays, designer shopping bags, and architectural drawings. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, and the room went silent. My stepmother, Veronica, was leaning over the granite countertop, aggressively circling items on a catalog. She looked up, her eyes scanning me with that familiar mix of boredom and disgust. "Good, you're up," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "We need you to clear out your room by tonight. The contractors are coming at 8 tomorrow morning to start the demo. Kylie needs the space for her shoe collection, and frankly, you don't need a view of the lake to study." My father walked in, adjusting his silk tie, looking every bit the successful real estate developer he pretended to be. He didn't say hello, he didn't acknowledge the date, he just tossed a heavy set of keys on the counter, keys to the unfinished basement storage room. "It's time you contributed to this family, Maya," he said, pouring himself a coffee. "Veronica and I discussed it. Since you're turning 18, we're done carrying you. You're moving downstairs. We're using the equity in this house to fund the renovation and Kylie's new car. It's only fair." I gripped my glass of water, feeling the cold condensation against my palm. "The equity in this house?" I asked, my voice calm, barely above a whisper. "Grandma Margaret left this house in the trust. You can't borrow against it." Robert laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound that used to make me flinch, but today it just made me focus. He walked over to his desk in the adjoining study and picked up the paper I had seen earlier. The will with the red ink. "You really don't get it, do you?" He waved the paper in the air. "I am the executor. I control the trust until you are 25. That's 7 years, Maya. 7 years where I decide what happens to every single dime. If you want tuition money, if you want a roof over your head, you will go downstairs, you will keep your mouth shut, and you will sign the papers I have prepared transferring the management rights to me permanently." He slammed the paper down. "Or I can cut you off right now. No college, no car, no home. Your choice." Kylie breezed into the room then, twirling a new Louis Vuitton bag that cost more than my entire wardrobe. She bumped my shoulder as she grabbed a strawberry from the fruit tray. "Don't be selfish, Maya. You're always so dramatic. Daddy, are we taking the Range Rover to brunch? I don't want to be late." "We're taking the Rover, Princess," Robert said, his face softening instantly. He turned back to me, his eyes hard again. "We'll be back at 4. Have your boxes packed and moved to the basement by the time we walk through that door. And wipe that look off your face. You should be grateful we still let you live here." Veronica grabbed her purse. "Let's go. I don't want to spend another minute in this negativity." I watched them parade out the front door. Robert, Veronica, and Kylie, the picture of a perfect, wealthy family. I watched them climb into the black Range Rover. I watched the garage door close. I waited until the engine faded down the street and the neighborhood fell silent. I didn't pack a single box. I walked over to the digital clock on the microwave. It read 10:14 a.m. My father was right about one thing. Grandma Margaret had left the house in a trust, but he was wrong about the terms. He had been reading the copy she gave him 5 years ago, the one she used to test his greed. He didn't know about the amendment she and I signed in secret 2 weeks before she died, the 12:01 a.m. clause. The amendment stated that the moment I turned 18, the restrictions regarding living expenses were lifted. The requirement for a guardian signature evaporated. At 12:01 a.m. today, the trust didn't just unlock, it transferred absolute unilateral authority to me. I wasn't just a beneficiary anymore. I was the sole trustee. I owned the house, I owned the cars, I owned the accounts, and I had the power to liquidate all of it without asking permission from anyone. I walked into my father's study, picked up the red-inked will he had used to threaten me, and dropped it into the shredder. The gears ground the paper into confetti. Then I pulled my burner phone from my pocket, the one I had bought with cash from tutoring jobs so they couldn't track my calls. I dialed a number I had stared at for 2 years. "Mr. Sterling," I said when the voice answered. "They're gone. It's time." "Happy birthday, Maya," the lawyer's voice came through, crisp and sharp. "Mr. Chen is 2 blocks away. He has the cashier's check. Are you ready to burn the bridge?" I looked around the house that had been my prison. I looked at the walls they planned to tear down. "I'm not just burning the bridge, Arthur," I said, a smile finally breaking across my face. "I'm selling the river." 2 minutes after I hung up the phone, a silver Mercedes sedan pulled into the driveway. It wasn't the flashy, leased luxury cars my father preferred. This was a vehicle that whispered old money and absolute discretion. Arthur Sterling stepped out, holding a slim leather briefcase. He looked exactly as he had the last time I saw him at my grandmother's funeral, sharp, terrifyingly competent, and wearing a suit that cost more than my stepmother's entire jewelry collection. He didn't knock. I opened the door before he reached the steps. "The deed is drafted," Arthur said, stepping into the foyer and bypassing the pleasantries. He placed the briefcase on the entry table, right next to a vase of imported lilies Veronica had bought with my tuition money. "The title search was completed 3 days ago. Clean. No liens, despite your father's best efforts to leverage the property. He couldn't borrow against a house he didn't legally own." I watched him lay out the documents. This moment had been 2 years in the making, orchestrated by the only person in this family who actually understood how the world worked, Margaret Brooks. 2 years ago, when Grandma Margaret was in hospice, she summoned me to her bedside. The cancer was eating her away, but her mind was a steel trap. She had ordered Robert out of the room, claiming she needed water. But the moment the door clicked shut, she grabbed my wrist with a grip that bruised. "Your father is a fool, Maya," she had rasped, her eyes burning. "He mistakes luck for skill and spending for wealth. He thinks he is waiting for me to die so he can inherit the kingdom. He doesn't know I've already changed the keys." She explained the trap she had set. She knew Robert wouldn't bother reading the fine print of the estate updates. He was lazy, arrogant, and accustomed to getting his way. She had shown him an early draft of the trust, Draft 4A, which listed the age of majority at 25 and named him as the primary steward. He had pocketed that draft and stopped paying attention. But the document Arthur Sterling was now smoothing out on the table was Irrevocable Trust Amendment 7B. The language was specific, brutal, and ironclad. It stated that upon the primary beneficiary, me, reaching the age of 18, the living expenses and maintenance restriction would be immediately nullified. The role of the guardian trustee, my father, would automatically dissolve without requirement of notice. At 12:01 a.m. on my 18th birthday, the trust became a simple pass-through entity under my sole control. Robert was living in a house he thought he controlled, spending money he thought was his, waiting for a payout that had already bypassed him. "You're sure he has no idea?" Arthur asked, snapping me back to the present. He handed me a heavy fountain pen. "He handed me the old will this morning to threaten me," I said, taking the pen. "He thinks I have to wait 7 years to touch a dime. He doesn't know the house belongs to me right now." "Correction," Arthur said, a thin smile touching his lips. "It belongs to you for another 14 minutes. Mr. Chen is pulling up now." Through the front window, I saw a matte black SUV turn into the driveway, blocking the exit. Marcus Chen stepped out. He was a legend in the commercial real estate world, a man who bought distressed assets in cash and turned them into gold mines. He wasn't here to live in the house. He was here because Arthur had tipped him off that a prime piece of real estate in a restricted gated community was about to go for 20% under market value for a quick cash close. Marcus walked in, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt that fit too well. He didn't look at the high ceilings or the crown molding. He looked at the floors, the support beams, the bones of the place. "Nice view," Marcus said, glancing toward the lake where Kylie liked to sunbathe. "Foundation looks solid. I don't care about the renovations. My crew will gut the interior anyway. The offer stands at $1,280,000, as is, cash, immediate possession." It was a lowball offer for the area, but I didn't care about maximizing profit. I cared about speed. I needed a transaction that closed instantly, one that made the property legally untouchable by my father before he finished his brunch. 1.28 is fine, I said calmly, but the wire has to hit before you leave the driveway. Marcus nodded. I brought the tablet. My bank is expecting the call. We moved to the kitchen island, the same island where, an hour ago, my stepmother had told me I was useless. Arthur spread out the warranty deed. It was a simple document with a catastrophic impact. It transferred the title from the Margaret Brooks Family Trust directly to Chen Holdings, LLC. I looked at the signature line, Maya Brooks, sole trustee. My hand didn't shake. I thought about the basement room my father tried to force me into. I thought about the tuition checks that had bounced last semester while Kylie drove a brand new convertible. I thought about Grandma Margaret, who had played the long game so I could win the final hand. I signed my name. The black ink flowed smoothly into the paper. Arthur notarized it instantly, stamping the document with a heavy thud that echoed in the empty kitchen. He pulled out his phone and snapped a high-resolution photo of the executed deed, uploading it directly to the county clerk's electronic filing system. "Deed recorded," Arthur said. "It's public record. You no longer own this home, Maya." Marcus tapped the screen of his tablet, initiating Fedwire, $1,280,000. We stood in silence for 45 seconds. The refrigerator hummed. The expensive clock on the wall ticked. My burner phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and opened the secure banking app Arthur had helped me set up days ago. Current balance, $1,280,000.00. Funds received, I said. Marcus Chen smiled, the first genuine expression I had seen on him. "Pleasure doing business. My security team is 5 minutes out. I assume the property is vacant?" "The property is vacant of tenants," Arthur interjected smoothly. "However, there are 3 unauthorized trespassers expected to return at 4 o'clock. We have prepared the necessary legal notices." Arthur reached in his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents labeled Notice to Quit and No Trespassing Warning. "Technically," Arthur said, "since the title has transferred, your father and his family are no longer residents. They are intruders in Mr. Chen's house. And since they have no lease agreement with the new owner, they have no rights to enter." I love a clean slate, Marcus said, checking his watch. My guys will handle the hardware. You might want to step outside. I grabbed the single duffel bag I had packed the night before. It contained my laptop, my birth certificate, my grandmother's jewelry, and 2 changes of clothes. Everything else, the expensive furniture, the electronics, the closets full of designer clothes Veronica had bought with trust money, I left behind. I wasn't just leaving a house, I was leaving a life. As I walked out the front door, 2 unmarked vans pulled up to the curb. 4 men in gray tactical polos hopped out carrying power drills and heavy cases. They weren't movers, they were locksmiths and security contractors. I walked across the street to where I had parked my beaten-up Honda Civic the night before, safely out of the driveway. I sat in the driver's seat and watched. I watched them drill out the locks my father had installed. I watched them install commercial-grade biometric deadbolts. I watched them place steel reinforcement plates over the door jambs. And then I watched one of the technicians attach a small black box to the front porch pillar. I knew what that was. It was a high-decibel proximity alarm, the system Arthur had insisted on. It didn't just lock the door, it turned the house into a fortress that screamed if anyone without a key fob tried to breach it. It was 11:30 a.m. The transaction was complete. The money was safe, the trap was armed. Now, all I had to do was wait for the Range Rover to come home. I sat in my Honda Civic across the street, the engine off, the windows cracked just enough to let in the humid afternoon air. Beside me, Arthur Sterling sat in his silver Mercedes, reviewing case files on his tablet. We were a silent vigil, watching the transformation of the house I had grown up in. For the next 4 hours, Marcus Chen's security team worked with military precision. They didn't just change the locks, they fortified the perimeter. The standard deadbolts were replaced with high-grade biometric scanners that glowed with a faint, ominous blue light. The decorative wood around the doorframe was reinforced with steel strike plates. They weren't securing a home, they were securing a vault. At 2 o'clock, the lead technician walked out to the curb and placed a small, subtle sign in the flower bed next to the walkway. It didn't say "Welcome." It read, "Property of Chen Holdings. No trespassing. Police dispatch automated." At 3 o'clock, Marcus Chen tapped on my window. "System is live," he said, leaning down. "We set it to distress mode. That means if anyone tries to force the code more than twice, or if the impact sensors detect kicking or pounding, it bypasses the warning chirp and goes straight to the main siren, 120 decibels. It also sends an immediate Priority 1 alert to the local precinct." "Perfect," I said. "My team is heading out," Marcus said, straightening up. "I'll be monitoring the cameras remotely. Enjoy the show, Maya." The vans pulled away, leaving the street quiet again. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but it was now a loaded weapon waiting for a trigger. I checked my watch, 3:58. Right on schedule, the black Range Rover turned the corner. It glided down the street, gleaming in the sunlight, a symbol of the money my father loved to spend but refused to earn. I sank lower in my seat, watching through the side mirror. They pulled into the driveway, oblivious. The doors opened, and the noise spilled out immediately. Kylie was the first one out, laughing loudly into her phone, holding 3 white shopping bags from the boutique downtown. Veronica stepped out of the passenger side, adjusting her sunglasses, looking annoyed but triumphant. "Robert, hurry up," Veronica called out, walking toward the porch. "I need to get these shoes out of the heat." My father stepped out of the driver's seat, whistling. He looked like a man who had won. He had successfully bullied his daughter, planned a renovation he couldn't afford, and secured his ego for another week. He walked up the steps, fishing his keychain from his pocket. He didn't notice the new sign in the flower bed. He didn't notice the faint blue light on the lock. He slid his key into the cylinder. It didn't go in. I watched him frown. He pulled the key out, looked at it, and tried again. He jiggled it, he shoved it. Nothing. The commercial-grade cylinder was completely different from the residential lock he had left that morning. "What is wrong with this thing?" Robert muttered, loud enough for me to hear across the quiet street. "Daddy, come on, it's hot," Kylie whined from behind him. "Hang on, the key is stuck or something," Robert snapped. He gave up on the physical key and moved to the keypad. He punched in the code. My birthday, ironically. The lock didn't click open. Instead, the small LED ring flashed a sharp, angry red. Beep, beep, beep. Access denied. Robert stared at the lock. He punched the code in again, harder this time, his finger jabbing the buttons. Beep, beep, beep. Access denied. "Robert, seriously?" Veronica sighed, walking up the steps to stand next to him. "Did you forget to pay the security bill again?" "I paid the damn bill," Robert shouted. His face was starting to turn that familiar shade of purple. "It's malfunctioning." He grabbed the door handle and rattled it violently. It didn't budge a millimeter. The steel reinforcements held fast. "Open!" he roared, and he slammed his open palm against the wood. When that didn't work, he kicked the bottom of the door with his expensive loafer. That was the trigger. The impact sensor tripped. The system engaged distress mode. The siren didn't ramp up, it exploded. A piercing, oscillating shriek erupted from the eaves of the porch, a sound so loud it was physically painful. It bounced off the neighboring houses and tore through the quiet afternoon. Kylie screamed and dropped her shopping bags, covering her ears. Veronica stumbled back, nearly tripping over her heels. Robert froze, looking up at the porch ceiling as if the house was attacking him. Then, the automated voice broadcasted over the siren, booming into the street. "Alert! Unauthorized entry detected. Police have been dispatched. Leave the premises immediately." Curtains in the houses next door flew open. Neighbors stepped out onto their porches, phones in hand. The spectacle my father had tried so hard to avoid, public embarrassment, was now happening at 120 decibels. Robert looked frantic. He tried to type the code again, but the keypad had locked him out completely. He turned to Veronica, shouting over the noise, "Call the alarm company! Tell them it's a glitch!" I watched him panic. He still thought it was his house. He still thought it was his alarm. He still thought he had control. I opened my car door and stepped out into the heat. Arthur Sterling opened his door at the exact same moment. We walked across the street together, the pavement radiating heat, the siren screaming our arrival. It was time to tell him the truth. 2 squad cars turned onto the street, their sirens wailing in harmony with the house alarm, creating a cacophony that brought the entire neighborhood to their front lawns. Blue and red lights flashed against the white stucco of the mansion, illuminating my father's terrified, sweating face. I stopped at the edge of the driveway, Arthur Sterling flanking me like a silent executioner. Robert spotted me instantly. The relief on his face washed away the panic for a split second, replaced immediately by his usual rage. He stormed down the driveway, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Maya, thank God! Did you change the code? Is this some sick birthday prank?" He was shouting to be heard over the noise. "Turn it off. Tell the police it's a mistake before I have you arrested for disturbing the peace." He reached out to grab my arm, to drag me toward the keypad. "I wouldn't touch her if I were you, Mr. Brooks." Arthur's voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it had the distinct, sharp timbre of a threat. Robert froze. He looked at Arthur, then at the 2 police officers stepping out of their vehicles with hands resting on their belts. "Who are you?" Robert snapped. "This is a family matter. My daughter changed the codes on my house." "Officer," Arthur said, ignoring my father and turning to the lead policeman, a tall man with a name tag reading S.G. Miller. "My client, the owner of this property, would like to file a formal complaint for criminal trespass." Robert laughed. It was a manic, breathless sound. Trespass? I own this house. I built this house. This is my daughter, and she is having a tantrum because— Show him, Arthur, I said. Arthur opened his leather folio. He didn't hand the papers to my father. He handed them to Sergeant Miller. This is the warranty deed, recorded electronically at 11:30 this morning with the county clerk, Arthur explained calmly. The property was sold by the Margaret Brooks Family Trust to Chen Holdings, LLC. The transaction is complete. The title has transferred. Sergeant Miller shone his flashlight on the document, scanning the official county stamp. He looked up at the house, then at my father. Sir, this deed lists a corporate entity as the owner. Do you have a lease agreement? A lease? Robert sputtered. I don't need a lease. I am the trustee. I control the estate. Not anymore, I said, stepping forward. I pulled the copy of the trust amendment from my bag, the one Grandma Margaret and I had signed. I held it up so he could read the bold text. The 12:01 a.m. clause, Dad, I said. Read it. Robert squinted at the paper. I watched his eyes track the lines. I saw the moment the color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly gray. He read the part where his guardianship dissolved the second I turned 18. He read the part where I became the sole trustee. He read the part where I had the unilateral power to sell everything. You couldn't, he whispered. The will, the red ink. You were editing a draft, Dad, I said. Grandma played you, and for the last 2 years, so did I. But the renovation, Kylie shrieked from the porch, realizing something was wrong. The contractors are coming tomorrow. My closet. There is no renovation, I said, looking at her. There is no closet, and there is no house. I sold it. The wire transfer hit my account 4 hours ago. You sold my house? Veronica screamed, rushing down the steps. You little brat, you can't do that. Robert, tell them she's lying. Robert didn't speak. He was leaning against the Range Rover, looking like he might vomit. Ma'am, step back, Sergeant Miller warned. He turned to my father. Mr. Brooks, according to these documents, you are no longer the owner or a tenant of this residence. The current owner has flagged this as a trespassing situation. You need to vacate the premises. But we live here, Veronica wailed. She grabbed her chest, her breathing becoming ragged and theatrical. Oh God, my heart! I'm going to faint! I need an ambulance! You're killing me, Maya! You're killing your mother! It was her classic move, the medical emergency card. She had used it to get out of PTA meetings, traffic tickets, and difficult conversations for years. Officer, Arthur said, his voice bored, Miss Brooks is not her mother, and if she requires medical assistance, I'm sure the paramedics can treat her on the public sidewalk, but she cannot remain on the driveway. Sergeant Miller wasn't buying it either. Ma'am, unless you need me to call EMS, you need to calm down. Veronica stopped hyperventilating instantly, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom. Robert pushed off the car. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, oily charm. He took a step toward me, opening his arms. Maya, honey, look, we got off on the wrong foot today. I know you're upset about the room change. We can fix that. We can talk about this inside. Just tell the lawyer to undo the sale. We're family. You wouldn't put your family on the street. You were going to put me